Welcome back to 20 Life Learners. Our speaker for today is Carmen, a final year chemical engineering student at UCT. Carmen will be presenting on disabilities and divorce, with specific reference to her life experiences. Firstly, she would take us through the challenges that came with being categorized as ADHD and dyslexic from a young age. She unpacks a range of issues, from the stigmatic language associated with disabilities to advice on how to find support as someone with ADHD and or dyslexia, and the importance of discovering methods that work for you. The second part of her presentation deals with the impacts of divorce. She uses her personal experiences with it to highlight some key issues that arise and how you can avoid them, as well as showing ways to make the best out of a divorce for all the parties involved. Finally, she brings the two topics together and gives some more tips that have helped her.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today I would like to use my biggest roadblocks to try and help anyone that's on this journey with me and to help you navigate them better. So I'm going to start off with a little bit about me. Um, just what made me who I am. So my name is Carmen. I grew up in Johannesburg in quite a privileged and sheltered upbringing. I went to a private school and honestly lived what most people would have called the perfect life. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was diagnosed with ADD and dyslexia, kind of by mistake. And honestly, I hate the word diagnosed. I honestly think that categorization would be a way better way to put it. And it's just, yeah. Anyway, I really struggled to read and focus. I clearly remember all the other kids moving on to different color books and which got thicker and longer. And I was kind of stuck on one book in the same color. All my report comments read, she's a daydreamer. She doesn't focus. She's easily distracted. So I really started my learning career feeling seriously incapable, behind, and stupid. And this was made so much worse by teachers and other kids just not understanding these categories that I found myself placed in. I would often hear people say, yeah, she's not very clever, and ooh, she's struggling a bit. And teachers would often be surprised by the work I would hand in and would question if I'd done them myself. I always found that I had to prove myself intellectually, both to myself and everyone around me. I was lucky enough to have really amazing parents who gave me all the support I ever needed. And so when I got to high school, I started to do a lot better. I was in the top set maths, I felt more confident, and had a great group of friends. My carefree, non competitive school was really good for me, and it was a really good place for me to flourish. At the start of my matric year, my parents got divorced, and I guess my perfect little bubble was popped. No one in my circles had divorced parents, and everyone around me came from perfect white upper class families. Um, and I felt really alone and misunderstood and shocked by all that had happened. So I kind of avoided this and dove into my leadership roles, my sports, and my work. And I ended up doing really well, getting into UCT and changing degrees and studying chemical engineering. I avoided dealing with all sorts of pains and I guess lived my best escapist life. But then everything hit me like a ton of bricks in my second year. I found myself in a really dark depression that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. However, through the tools I'm going to share with you today, I've learned to only have minor anxiety. And yeah, I would just like everyone to kind of be in a space where they love being who they are. I love being ADD and I love my family just the way it is. So I hope this roadmap will help you do the same. So let's first understand what this kind of title of being someone who's disabled means and what we can actually be better, at doing in these sort of situations. There's a lot of misunderstanding with ADD, so I'd kind of like to focus there today. People think it's some sort of joke. So I want to do some myth busting. This diagram at the bottom, I think, perfectly describes what it feels like to have ADD. There's just 1,000 thoughts in your head, and it's so hard to focus on what's in front of you and what you need to focus on. People often think that this is some kind of joke to try and get Ritalin or extra time, and they don't understand that takes months of report collections, poking and prodding, and mental testing, and this takes a whole medical team. It's not something to get an added advantage. It's simply equalizing the playing field. That a playing field that only suits people of a certain learning style and thinking style. I often actually feel humiliated by my extra time. When I'm the last person sitting in the room and everyone's leaving, it just kind of reiterates and magnifies this voice inside of my head that asks me, what the hell are you doing here? Everyone here got like 20 A's and you're trying to do this and you're dyslexic and ADD. So yeah, I often feel embarrassed by it. And this is where I've come to the conclusion that you can be given all the tools in the world, but if society and yourself tells you that you're slower, dumber, and less able, it's so hard to do the best that you can. To this day, I really struggle with debilitating performance anxiety. And I think that's what people forget about this is you can help these people as much as you can. But if they've been told this their whole life, they're often going to struggle from anxiety of not feeling good enough. And yeah, I mean, even like recently, about a year ago, an exam invigilator came up to me and asked me if something was wrong. And I said, no, what's wrong? And she said, well, you've been staring at the front cover of your exam paper for the last hour, where I thought I'd just started. So it really is, something that keeps cropping up in different forms. I want people to understand that, it's if we'd scanned a person's brain who's ADD and someone who's not ADD, our brain scans would literally be different. We're literally wired differently. However, it has no effect on intellectual capability. Actually, a telltale sign of someone with ADD is an abnormally high IQ. I wish we could start telling kids that instead of telling them that they're disabled and they have learning difficulties, but rather telling them that their brains just operate differently. People also think ADD is just people who are hyperactive. There's so many different types of ADD, one of which is hyperactivity. There's also another type that's inactive, aloof, and withdrawn, and then also a combination. So yeah, let's move on now to ways we can understand what it's like to be someone with ADD. I think we're often told that we're too much, that we're so loud and, obnoxious. And I think it makes you feel like you can't contribute, and that you're just too much for any situation. From the research I've done, this actually affects women and communities of color disproportionately. And being hyperactive, these kids are often the most abused kids in the world because they constantly shouted at because everyone thinks they're just ill-disciplined. And from my experience, the more discipline and rules, the worse these kids actually do. Yes. Now I'd like to chat of ways we can support someone around us with ADD. Routine is so important. I think it's the only way to get things done if this is how your brain operates. Reminders become your best friend. And if you're friends with someone with ADD, remind them 10 times of the thing that you wanted them to remember. Because I'm telling you now, with all this distraction, they probably won't remember. I think before turning to medicine, focus on trying to find the right mentors. People that can just remind you of what's important, what you're trying to work towards, and people that can keep you on track without taking medicine that changes your personality. Also, lifestyle is super important. Cut out sugar and caffeine, and exercise is an amazing tool to kind of stay on top of all that energy. I think another thing that people like to forget is that ADD affects all parts of your life, not just when you're trying to work. It affects you socially. I'm often late, forgetful of plans, and I struggle to follow conversations because I've got so much going on in my head. People often say, oh, you're rude, you're uncaring, inconsistent, all over the place, or just too much. And to anyone who's ever been told this, I hope you understand that you're just in the wrong space. There will be spaces of people that understand and love you for who you are, the mad bundle of busy energy. And if you're not in that space, you need to find one that's bigger and more understanding. I've honestly come to love the exciting life that I have and the busy mind that I have. I honestly have creative ideas at every breath I take and a rush of endless energy. And I've come to see these disabilities as some of my greatest strengths. So now let's switch lanes to divorces. Um, I see divorce as an opportunity for parents to live their life more fully, to live their truth, to be loved, and to really just, restart their life in a different way. However, this often leaves children with immense battles that they need to face and huge mountains that they need to climb. Um, so let's look at the first mountain. So the first mountain is often this very difficult process of, legal process of settlements and sorting out assets and all this sort of stuff. I was really lucky. My parents, settled this within a week. But for most people, this takes months, years. And it's really this horrible, insult flinging, endless arguments around assets and money. And if there's anything you take from this, it's try and encourage your parents to do this as fast and as easily as possible. Even if your parents walk out of these agreements with absolutely nothing, the fighting will kill their souls and any hope of any relationship in the future between your parents. The second hill is everyone's reactions to this title of my parents are divorced. Often people are talking behind your back. You hear, oh my word, did you hear? And yeah, it's just a horrible experience of constantly being pitied. And I've kind of just decided that, if it's not your family and you haven't personally been told about this person's family or their divorce, don't speak about it, don't ask them about it, unless you're trying to get them help. It's just really none of your business. And it makes everything so much harder. The third hill is your parents start moving on. And this might feel like you over here and, everyone's kind of moving on with their lives and creating new lives. And you end up feeling like your own little family. And this can be very lonely and lead to some seriously codependent relationships if you don't try and work on it. And the final mountain to climb, which I think is kind of never ending, is this idea about rebuilding what family means and rebuilding your relationships with your parents. It's this constant like juggling game of spending this amount of time with this parent and trying to please everyone while keeping yourself happy. So, what can you do to support someone who's going through this? So, let's look at that. So, I think the first thing is take time to understand what they're going through and what they need from you. Because every divorce is so different, and everyone needs something different from people close to them. Stop asking questions like, what are you doing for the holidays or your birthday? Where's your parents going to be? It's such an anxious question, and it's filled with so many balancing acts. And to try and explain that to someone in a quick, sentence is so difficult. So unless they bring up what's happening in their holiday, rather don't ask because it's so difficult to explain. Trying to work this all out every time. Stop pitying people. It's just not necessary and it makes everything worse. So, yeah, just no thank you. I think one of the worst traits of our society is we're all trying to be perfect. We're trying to portray this perfect family image while we're all going through so much with our families. And I think had we all taken the time to just be more honest and open with each other, I think this would be so much easier because you would feel so much more supported. Yeah. I think the final thing is if you're going through this right now and you're trying to survive this uphill battle, which is divorce, I think something you can do is speak up for yourself. Go and ask for help from people you care about, who care about you, and most importantly, someone who's been through the same pain. There's nothing worse than confiding in someone and then having to console them because you can see the pain in their eyes from what you've just told them. If you can afford to see a therapist and that works for you, I would honestly suggest it. I think it's a great way to work through this. The second thing is build new definitions of family and make sure whatever you're building that the civil relationship between your parents after divorce is the main priority. It makes it so much easier. Honestly, having both my parents at my 21st laughing together, going for family dinners still, even after everything that's happened, is just the most amazing thing. And I wish everyone could have that. And then finally, setting boundaries is really important. I think when your parents get divorced, you become like their best friend and their therapist, and you're going through enough yourself. It's not your job to be there for them and to be the peacekeeper or to be, the person they're coming to with their problems, because it damages your relationship with the other parent. So yeah, I've spoken a lot about, all these things that have happened on my journey. So I just like to end off with 3 of my life lessons or mottos. I think the first one is grow your eulogy as fiercely as you grow your CV. I think especially in your 20s, you're so focused on building this amazing CV, but if that's 10 pages and your eulogy would be 2, you need to check your capitalist mindset. I think the second thing is just stop and reflect. I can promise you now, there's nothing that you can't answer internally, and by, just reflecting on whatever you are struggling with. And finally, if you're at a crossroads in your life and you're trying to make decisions, choose the path that scares you the most, because I promise you it'll lead to the most growth. So thank you for coming along on this journey. It's got a couple of turns and bumps. But yeah, thank you. It's been awesome. And I hope you've picked up some tools along the way.
Thank you to this week's Life Learner. Please stay tuned for our next video.